Welcome once again. I'm Charlie Greenberg, your host, moderator, and today co-presenter for Digital Business Demos. Thanks for joining us as we continue to provide live business demos that focus on different digital transformation and platform strategies, and in particular demonstrate different components and products within Software AG's digital business platform. As some of you might know, April 15th marked the day of general availability for WebMethods 10.2, and in that context, we're going to talk about one of our B2B solutions for MFT, or Managed File Transfer, and that's known as WebMethods ActiveTransfer. But the real focus is to introduce you to ActiveTransfer agents, or as we also like to call them, Filebots. So in just a moment, I'll be joined by our Director of Product Management, Ramesh Venked, who will delve into the technology specifics of ActiveTransfer agents, discuss some of the use cases, and of course provide an MFT agent software demonstration. And today's presentation is brought to you, as usual, by Software AG, a customer-centric leader in many innovative and digital technology categories. Additionally, we have more than 4,300 employees, $1 billion in annual revenue, and we can cite over 70% of the Global 1,000 as customers. And those customers, well, they include over 2 million developers at leading organizations who have adopted Software AG products to innovate solutions and build applications cross-industry, cross-private and public sectors, and who rely on Software AG to help complete their journeys as digital enterprises through the end-to-end capabilities of the digital business platform. Now, before we discuss MFT agents, I'd like to tie together our B2B capabilities with what has emerged as a leading-edge B2B integration strategy. So you may know that trading networks could be considered a legacy solution. In fact, Trading Networks is the very first B2B gateway. It's been around and evolving for 20 years. It's being used by well over 1,700 customers, and partners, actually including at least 2 of our major competitors, use Software AG's B2B platform to power their own business solutions. And of course, our own customers are using WebMethods B2B integration to power and drive their own business objectives, whether that is a holistic enterprise-wide EDI platform devoted to maximizing supply chain and logistics efficiency, or a more point solution guaranteeing the speedy delivery of file exchanges across partners, customers, suppliers, and vendors. So we position Software AG's B2B integration platform by singling out 4 core solutions. We've already mentioned Trading Networks, which provides the centralized management and super quick onboarding for any partners, or accomplished through a secure single B2B gateway. But there's also ActiveTransfer, as mentioned as well, a very feature-rich managed file transfer application, which is deployable on the same B2B gateway for direct integration with Trading Networks. The same integration applies to our EDI support, or E-standards, which in addition to supporting all major EDI and XML-based standards, has a comprehensive library of industry-based standards, including healthcare, financial services, banking, as well as complete support for transmission standards. And while Trading Networks and ActiveTransfer provide comprehensive tracking, alerts, and monitoring out of the box, we also provide an additional layer of assurance through the real-time end-to-end tracking of KPIs and SLAs provided by Optimize for B2B. That said, fortunately, we've recently had the opportunity to once again validate this platform strategy, and that was when Forrester Research reached out to Software AG to participate in their first wave for operational intelligence for B2B integration. And if you've not seen it, Here is the wave, published this past January, with Software AG's B2B integration platform cited as a leader. Now, if you look to the left, you can see the suite of capabilities we actually presented and demoed to Forrester, including 2 additional solutions you didn't see on the previous slide. There's Match Zone for dashboarding, but there's also Zementis, which is Software AG's AI solution for machine learning, and that, in addition to the core B2B platform, was looked upon quite favorably by the Forrester analyst. So I think it's about time to pass the baton over to Ramesh. But just putting my webinar host cap back on for a moment, please keep in mind that following today's presentation, we will provide, as usual, a Q&A session. So use the WebEx Q&A box, if you will, at the bottom right-hand side of your screen for any questions and comments at any point in time during the presentation. And with that, it's my pleasure to introduce my colleague, Ramesh Venkat.
Thank you, Charlie. So let me share my screen. Okay, very good. Hopefully everybody can see the screen. So let me touch on the focus of our discussion today, which is what we're calling it as agent-based MFT. As most of you know, we already have a market-leading MFT solution called the webMethods ActiveTransfer. So as Charlie touched on, we have a suite of products that's part of the ActiveTransfer family. So we have ActiveTransfer Server, we have ActiveTransfer Gateway, the DMZ product for receiving inbound transfers, and then we have the ActiveTransfer Web Client. Now, with this agent-based MFT capability, we are going to be offering, since the 10.2 release that just got released a couple of weeks ago, now we're going to have the ActiveTransfer agent that's going to be part of the ActiveTransfer family of products. So what is all this agent-based MFT about? So let me quickly touch on the primary use cases for this. One of the classic use cases out there is exchanging files between a central IT infrastructure, which is where probably the ActiveTransfer server might be located, and you may have a need to now transfer files with let's say you're in the retail industry, for example. You may have stores distributed across the globe, or you may be in the financial services industry. You may have a bank branches distributed across the globe, or you may be a warehousing, a logistics provider. You may have distributed warehouses throughout the globe. So when you have such distributed, installations of your environment, whether it may be stores, bank branches, warehouses, so on and so forth, you are going to have IT systems in those remote locations as well. And you may have a need to transfer files between those remote systems and your central IT infrastructure. In a store type example, you may have, obviously, you're gathering point of sale data, POS data. Every time a transaction is done, you're gathering point of sale data. You may also want to know the latest inventory information in the stores. On the flip side, the stores need to receive the latest pricing data, the latest promotions data, and that's typically coming from the central IT server. So there is back and forth exchange of information, which typically happens through files between these remote systems, which again through stores, distributed warehouses, and so on and so forth. So there's an exchange of information that happens between these remote systems and the central IT infrastructure. And that is where this agent capability comes in. Now, again, if you're wondering, I'm already using an FTP server in these remote systems. I may have an SFTP server in these remote systems. So why an agent? So the biggest benefit you're going to get out of an agent is the fact that it's centrally managed through ActiveTransfer Server. So you don't need to go to those remote installations to install those FTP servers, SFTP servers, maintain the updates to those servers, do bug fixes, do fixes, apply patches, and so on and so forth. which probably for the most part happens manually if you're relying on FTP servers and SFTP servers in those remote installations. And that is where these agents come in, right? With agents, we are going to be deploying these ActiveTransfer agents in these remote installations. Again, whether it's stores, bank branches, warehouses, the remote systems, so on and so forth, they're all centrally managed through ActiveTransfer server. We can push the configurations directly to the agent from the ActiveTransfer server. We can, of course, initiate transfers triggered by events, or it could be on a set schedule. These transfers are initiated directly within the agents, right? Again, on a, it could be, the transfers could be triggered by a particular event that's happening in the agent system. Perhaps a file gets dropped into a file system location that the agent is monitoring. That will automatically trigger the file transfer. Or it could be a scheduled basis. So I'll kind of touch on some of those details in my demo shortly. And then, of course, you can upload or download files with the ActiveTransfer server, which is installed in the central environment. Now, the other capability we're offering on the ActiveTransfer side is the fact that a lot of the times the file transfers are not unique to a particular remote agent, right? They're not unique to a particular store. They're not unique to a branch. Typically, you may have common file transfer characteristics that apply across a whole suite of stores, a whole set of stores, a whole set of bank branches, and so on, a whole set of systems, and so on. So you want to define one interface that captures the file transfer across all of these stores, right? So that makes your management a lot simpler, a lot easier, rather than defining file transfer for each and every remote location out there. And those are all the benefits that ActiveTransfer brings to the table, right? Now, if you look at the architecture, so we are going to be, so the way the remote installation of these agents are going to be facilitated or going to be managed through Command Central. You can install the agents through Command Central. And then the agents, of course, once it's installed, once it's enabled, they will be exchanging files with the ActiveTransfer server. Now, the mode of communication that happens between the ActiveTransfer and the agents, ActiveTransfer agents, and the ActiveTransfer server is through secure HTTP protocol. And at this point, we are primarily leveraging username password-based authentication to keep the connection secure. Now, if you look at the components that are part of the ActiveTransfer agent, the primary runtime for the agent we're leveraging is integration server. And then the other component is an SPM plugin specifically for ActiveTransfer agent. Now, as for those of you who are already using Command Central, you might know you'll get an SPM whenever you're managing remote instances through Command Central. So there'll be an SPM plugin. And then we have a package that's core to the ActiveTransfer agent, and that provides the ActiveTransfer agent runtime pieces that's directly sitting on top of the integration server. Now, one thing to note is that don't get too hung up on the fact that the agent is running on integration server. Down the road, we're just using integration server as a runtime. Down the road, in October timeframe, we may switch the integration server with some other runtime. But as of right now, it uses integration server as the runtime. Now, if you look at the setup and configuration activities associated with the agent, the first thing you would need to do is, of course, you would install the agent through Command Central. Once it's installed, you would enable the agents. That's done through ActiveTransfer server. And then you would create agent groups. The agent groups are required, again, to ensure if you have common file transfer characteristics across a set of stores, across a set of systems, then you define an agent group, and you define the interface on this you define the agent group, and then you define the transfer for a particular agent group. and then that applies across all of the stores, and that's when agent group would be required. So typically, if you're going to be adopting agents, you're going to have one or more remote locations that needs to be managed through agents, and you can definitely leverage the agent groups concept. I'll again touch on that shortly in the demo. And finally, you would configure the agent events to perform the file transfer. So let me touch on the agent events in a bit more detail. Here is where you're actually defining the file transfer events, right? You could define it based on a set schedule. So, for example, you may want to trigger the file transfer between the agent and the ActiveTransfer server to trigger it. If it's let's say a point of sale data you want to upload, you want to send it to the central server. You may do this end of the day every day, or whatever your frequency may be. Provide all of the options that is available in a typical scheduler. Run it once on a fixed interval basis, run every day, run every hour, whatever your schedule may be. You can set that up in the UI, and then you trigger the event to apply across all agents or for a particular agent group or one or more agent groups, right? Whatever your requirement is, you can apply the event to get triggered across a set of agents. And then you define the actions, right? Here is where you're specifically defining exactly what you want to do. Now, as part of this agent transfer capability, some of the actions we're offering is, of course, you want to move the files, right, from point A to point B. In this case, you want to take the file from, let's say, agent location, move it to the ActiveTransfer server. So ActiveTransfer server, of course, probably connects to another file system in your central environment, or it could be talking to another server. Whatever that may be, all of the capabilities are available. So you're basically moving the file from a location on the agent side to a location on the central server side, or on the reverse side, you may actually pull the file from the central server and bring it to the agent side, right? So you can do it both ways. And then the other capabilities we are offering is you can rename the files at source and destination. You can delete the original files. You can verify files, checksum, and then as well as zip files as well. So now let me quickly get into the demo environment. So let me switch gears and do a quick demo. So for this demo, I have two scenarios that I want to talk about. In the first scenario, I'm going to deliver sales promotion data to East Coast region stores, okay? So I have, in my demo environment, I have a couple of stores that are set up. For a minute, assume that they're all on the East Coast. So I have an agent group defined called East Coast. So I basically want to move files from the server to all stores located in the East Coast, okay? So as part of that, the key steps you would define in order to configure the scenario, you need to define the agent event, one or more events. You would trigger it to apply for the East Coast region stores. And of course, you specify the schedule to execute the events. And you would also specify the time zone as to when you want to execute the event. The reason you need to specify the time zone is that because, the server and the agents may be located in a completely different time zone. So let's say your server is somewhere in the Midwest region in the U.S. Let's say Chicago, for example, and your stores are on the East Coast time zone, New York City, Washington, Boston, so on and so forth. And if you want to execute this event at a particular time, let's say 7 a.m. Eastern time zone, right? Then you can specify Eastern time zone, even though you're configuring, managing all of this in the ActiveTransfer server. You are specifically saying kick off this event, not on the server time zone, but specifically at a particular time zone which you explicitly define in the event. And then you have, and then you define the actions. You copy the files from Server in this case, because I'm delivering the file, I'm delivering files to the agents. So I'm copying the file from the ActiveTransfer server. I'm picking up files. It could be from a virtual folder, a local file system on the server side, and then move it to the agent. And then I can optionally select options to rename files if I want to at source or destination, delete the original files, and then zip files as well. Okay, so let me demonstrate that scenario. Okay, let me move to my environment. So you can see, sorry, I'm kind of getting over a little bit of a cough and cold here. From time to time, I may take a pause, but okay, so let's move on. So as you can see here, I have a set of interfaces available for agents that were just added in the 10.2 release. So all of the screens for agent management are available under agent management. So you have agents, agent groups, and agent events. Now, typically you would configure all of these agents you would install these agents through Command Central. Once they're installed, then you would come to the, in my demo environment, I've already installed these agents in Command Central. So let's assume that's already done. I would come to agent screen, and then you would synchronize. You'd click on the synchronize button. This will automatically pull up the agents that was installed by Command Central, and then it'll automatically enable them. So as you can see here, these agents are enabled and they're good to go. In my demo environment, I have two agents defined. I have a New York store and then a Washington store. These are the two agents defined. And they're actually part of two different groups. For the New York store, it's part of a New York store group, and it's also part of the East Coast store group. And the Washington store is part of the Washington store group, and then it's also part of the East Coast store group. So I have agents defined, and then I come to agent groups. Since I want to execute these agent events across all stores in a particular region, I want to leverage the agent group. So I have defined an agent group. So let's look at the New York stores group. Actually, let's look at the East Coast stores groups. And if you look at the East Coast stores group, I defined a group where I've put in both of my East Coast stores as part of this group. So later on, I'll show you when I kick off the event, I just say apply for this group. It will automatically kick off the event for all agents that is part of this group. Okay. So you can define as many groups as you want, and then you would and then we have the agent event screen, which is where it uses the group. So I have, in this case right now, I have the two agent events defined. So the one that we are looking at is the deliver files to stores definition agent event. Now, if you look at this event in a bit more detail, you can see the criteria. But this is, I can apply this event across all agents, either across all agents or across all agents in the following group. And I've specified East Coast store as the group that this agent event needs to apply for. So for both the Washington store, New York store are part of the East Coast store group. So these definitions I have will apply for both of those stores. Now, if you look at the schedule, in my case, of course, as before, you get all the different options available in order to run your scheduled job. In my case, I've set it up to run it on a fixed interval basis. In this case, it's running every hour. And if you look at the transfer definition, this is where you're specifying the actions to perform for this particular event. So in my case, since I'm delivering files to stores, I am copying files from the ActiveTransfer server. In my case, I have a virtual folder defined called store locations. If you go into the virtual folder screen in ActiveTransfer server, you would see a store location as a folder. So I'm selecting that virtual folder, taking the files from there, and then moving it to a local file system on the agent side. And then I go to the advanced settings. In my case, I've not defined any particular option. If you want to, you can rename file at the source once it's moved, or rename file at destination. You can delete the original file. You can do a checksum, or you can zip file. So you have a lot of options available to even customize your transfer, whether you want to rename and verify file checksum and so on and so forth. Okay. So that's the agent definition. Now, since this has been running every hour, so I should have some events already triggered. Now, so in order to monitor exactly those events, we have added a set of screens on the monitoring side within the MWS interface. So we have as you guys already know, we have a bunch of monitoring screens, and then we added the agent event log and then agent activity log to those screens. Now, if you go into the agent event log, you can see all of the agents that are all of the events that have been running. Now, let's look at the one that isn't focused right now, which is deliver files to stores. Now it's giving me high-level metadata. So the last time it ran was at 4:10 p.m. This is a server. In my case, this is a server running in Germany, Central European times, which is 5:28 over there. So this ran about 1 hour ago. So you can see it gives me high-level metadata when the event ran and it was successful. If I drill into it, when I drill into it, it gives me, it tells me that both of the agents, right, that I'm sending files to were successful. So I delivered files to both the stores that were part of the East Coast store group, so both the New York store and the Washington store. The agent ran successfully. The fact that it's telling me it's success. Now, if I drill into the New York store, so again, I see metadata. And then let's drill into the activities. So here is where it gives me complete audit trail of everything that was performed with the file transfer, moving the file from the server environment. So it's telling me it picked up the files from the virtual folder store locations. So these are, promotions data. It picked up 3 files, and then it copied it to the agent location. It's telling me, in this case, it copied it to the New York store location, and it copied those 3 files, and the event was executed successfully. Similarly, when I click on the Washington store, you would see a similar audit trail. So again, it picked up files from the store location from the server, and then it dropped those 3 files on the Washington store location. Now, also one thing to note is that you can specify. You don't need to be very explicit in defining exactly what location it's going to. In terms of what I mean is the store location, right? So you can specify variables, as you can see here. When you copy the files to the store, you can just use a variable agent name. So in my case, obviously, I have, given the demo environment, I have both the agents and the ActiveTransfer server. They're all running in the same instance. So I've used a variable called agent name. So it actually creates an appropriate folder, uses a variable agent name, and drops it in the appropriate location. So hopefully, this gave you a good idea of how the agent transfers are done. Now, let me switch gears and go to the second scenario. The second scenario is very similar, which is, in this case, rather than me sending files to stores, I'm now retrieving data, right? I'm actually transmitting point-of-sale data from the same stores, East Coast stores, to the central IT system. So it's an exact reverse scenario. Now I'm pulling files, or the agents are pushing files to the central IT server. Again, in order to do this, you define the agent events. You trigger it for the East Coast region stores. You specify the schedule, and then you define the event actions. Okay, so as part of the event action, again, you copy files, from the agent, you copy to the, it's just the reverse in this case, right? You're copying files from the ActiveTransfer agent, you're copying files to the ActiveTransfer server, and then of course you can specify those optional specifications around renaming files, deleting files, and so on and so forth. So let me show you the demo. Okay, so in this particular case, we're going to look at the event called retrieve sales records, and this is the one that is actually this is the scenario where we are actually getting the data from the agent system, or agent is pushing the data from its file system to the ActiveTransfer server. So again, excuse me, hold on. Sorry about that. I got to take this momentary pauses to get my coughing over. Okay. So we have agents defined for the East Coast store group, the same thing. And then we have a schedule defined on a fixed interval basis. Again, I'm triggering these events at a particular time zone. In this case, I'm triggering, since the server is running in Europe, of course, I'm triggering these events at a Central European time. Ideally, I should have done it to execute in an Eastern time zone, but in this case, I'm triggering it in a Central European time. And I'm triggering the schedule every hour, right? So every hour, it picks up the files from the agent system. It actually picks up the files from both the agent locations. You can see the agent name here, both the agent location, New York store and the Washington store, and then it drops it to the ActiveTransfer server. Okay. So it's just a reverse scenario, right? I'm picking up the files from the agent system and then moving it to the ActiveTransfer server. Then of course I can specify advanced settings if I want, renaming files and so on and so forth, which I'm not in this case, but you can do the same. So let's go look at the event log for this scenario. So in this case, we're looking at the retrieve file scenario. So this retrieve file scenario was also performed for both the stores, New York store and Washington store. So let me go click on the New York store. So I get to see the high-level metadata for the New York store. And it's telling me it was executed successfully. Now, if you go look at the activities associated with the New York store, so it picked up 3 items. It actually, it picked up, it found 3 items. In this case, they were point of sale data. It picked up the 3 files on the agent system, and then it copied the files to the server. Okay. Now, I have a local file system defined for the server, so it moves the files to the local file system in the central. Imagine it's a central IT server, and moved it. Similarly, for the Washington store, the same thing happened. It picked up the files from the Washington store, and then it moved it to the appropriate location in the central IT server. So hopefully this gave you a good idea of what agents can do. Now, I think now the thing is that, I think some of you may be wondering why is it called Filebots. The reason we call it as this agent, but the webinar was called Filebots. The reason is, all of this is automated, right? It's all automatic. So once you define the agent event, once you define the definitions, once you specify the schedule, then everything is automatic. It picks up the files in the right place and moves it to the right location, triggered at a particular time of day, or whatever its schedule may be across different store locations. So everything is automated, and that's why we call it as Filebot. almost like a robot, right, in the file, on your agent side that picks up the files from the corresponding agent store location and moves it to the central server. Also, one other thing to note is that for those of you, I know I've seen a few customers that already use ActiveTransfer. So for those of you that you already use ActiveTransfer Server, agent is a nice add-on. So if you have use cases where you have remote systems, or if you're a retail industry, stores, etc., you can add agents to your capability and automatically also now handle use cases dealing with file transfers between stores and your central IT server, or any of the remote systems you may have, deal with the file transfer between those remote locations and the central IT server. Okay? So with that, let me turn it over to Charlie for the rest of the for the Q&A, and he may touch on a couple of points on the user groups that are upcoming user groups coming up next month. Over to you, Charlie.
Thank you very much, Ramesh, and thanks for that demo. I mean, Ramesh pointed out that as far as retail is concerned, agents are really used very productively for disseminating pricing and promotional information across store locations. But there's also, just to perhaps tell you the obvious, that, there's bank and branches where agents will automatically potentially send end-of-day reconciliation reports, or distributors can use agents to synchronize file transfers, to share product catalog changes across any number of warehouses. So you can get a feel for how well these agents can be put into use as far as companies with numerous remote locations. And as Ramesh was also saying, before we go to Q&A, I'd like to point out that Software AG is sponsoring 2 user group sessions that are right around the corner, not necessarily logistically, but in the calendar sense, and we want to make you aware of those. The purpose of these events is to share best practices with fellow Software AG customers, share user experiences, see what's trending and what's coming up on the product roadmaps. So please go to the Software AG site where you can register at no cost for either the San Francisco location on May 8th, which focuses on web methods products, but also Eris and Alphabet. Or we'd love to see you May 10th in Austin, Texas for another deep dive discussion on web methods, plus Adabase and Natural. And if you don't want to memorize the registration link that you're looking at right now, we'll send it to you right now in real time, special delivery via the chat box. Just please go ahead and request it right now. And with that, here's our first question. And I'll tell you right now, Ramesh is going to probably handle most of these. So Ramesh, can you describe the necessary components for an agent implementation? And while you're at it, would you also revisit the Command Central piece?
Okay, sure. So the agent components, you need to, first of all, of course, there is a dependency in ActiveTransfer Server. You need to have ActiveTransfer Server in order for agents to communicate, do the file transfers with agent, with the ActiveTransfer Server, right? You need to have ActiveTransfer Server. Okay. On the agent side, the components for the agent are when you install an agent, it'll automatically bring in, it'll bring in integration server, it'll have the SPM plugin, the Command Central SPM plugin, as well as it'll bring in the appropriate packages associated with the ActiveTransfer agent. So you don't need to worry about exactly what is part of the agent. It's all automatically installed for you. And of course, we are going to be leveraging. So you will be able to install these agents through Command Central, right? You define, as with any other installation of methods products, it's no different here with ActiveTransfer agents. You can you specify exactly what the nodes are, where you want to install the agents, you define those, and then you can install them directly through Command Central. So you can both do the installation as well as do the fix management using Command Central. And once it's installed, the rest of the configurations, enablement, everything is all done within the ActiveTransfer server screens that I just demonstrated to you earlier.
It sounds like, yes, sir. It sounds like you're potentially discussing use cases where there could be thousands of agent nodes. Are there performance limitations?
No, there's absolutely no performance limitations. In fact, we have, already demonstrated this with Command Central. We already use Command Central for, several hundred, several thousand nodes for installation and fix management. And we've been actually incorporating some of those, thousands of node type scenarios in our test case scenarios, in our test cases. And we've been testing against those, and we don't see any performance limitations at all.
Okay, so this could have a very long answer, but you be the judge of this or that. Why is this functionality very useful when compared to existing MFT functionality, where file transfers activity is local or remote transactions?
Charlie, would you mind repeating that question? I don't think I got the whole thing.
Okay, so why is this functionality very useful when compared to existing MFT functionality or file transfers where the activity is local or remote?
Okay. Yeah, well, as I mentioned when I touched on the use cases, agents come into picture, right, when you have remote systems, right? They're outside of your firewall. They are, in order to obviously communicate with these remote systems that are outside of your firewall, you may be leveraging FTP server, SFTP server, etc., right, which are not easy to manage, which are not centrally managed. These are typically one-off installations spread all over. And with agents coming into picture, these are lightweight agents, and they're centrally managed, centrally monitored. So you don't need to handle the servers that you may have today, FTP server, SFTP server, that you're relying. You don't need to manage them one at a time across all of your geographic locations. And that's where agents are very helpful, again, because centrally managed, centrally monitored, and you can deal with, and you're able to do file transfers across all of these agents located in the located in these geographic locations away from your central IT environment. So the key thing to note here is that it's centrally managed, centrally monitored, and that's a big benefit you're getting here.
Thank you. So I'll just precede this question with a statement. This is a new product. This is just coming out now, and it is now available. So with that said, which version of ActiveTransfer provides agents availability? And the second part of the question is, does it have backward compatibility?
Good question. So this is coming out in the 10.2 release, the just released version, 10.2, a couple of weeks ago. At this point, it's not backward compatible with the older versions of ActiveTransfer. We have made a lot of changes on the server side as well in order to deal with the ActiveTransfer agent, the communications agent. So it's not backward compatible at this time. So again, the agents are installable, are available from the 10.2 version onwards.
So here's a question now I'll actually answer for a change, and the question is, what's the pricing model for agents? I think Ramesh has already indicated that there's a prerequisite of ActiveTransfer server And of course, that sits atop integration server and comes with Command Central. But perhaps the main question is answered by saying the agents is provided, as is also said, as an add-on, and it is also sold as a perpetual license or subscription license. And again, if you're currently an ActiveTransfer MFT user, you should really take a look at this. Next question. Are the connections between the agent and the IT server secure?
Yes, yeah, absolutely, they're secure. We are actually leveraging the HTTPS connection today, and we use the username password type authentication, and in fact we're going to make it even more secure through we're going to add the certificate capability as well. So to answer your question, yes, it is secure.
Okay, thank you. What is the memory footprint of the agent?
It is very small, so I'm not sure somebody's talking about the actual disk space required for the agent. If that is the question, I think there may be some other questions around this topic as well. I see some of the questions on this topic. So today, just to be clear, today we are using integration server as a runtime for this agent. Okay. Now, obviously, the footprint is a little bit bigger with integration server. However, that's going to be changing in the upcoming release in 10.3 in October 2018. We're going to be switching the runtime. We're actually looking at providing a different runtime that will actually reduce the footprint to less than 500 MB. So we are targeting somewhere around 400 megabytes for just the actual disk space required to install the agent. Okay, and hopefully that answers the question.
Okay, we still have a few questions left, and I think some time. So please feel free still at this point in the session to enter any questions you might have into the Q&A WebEx box. Once MFT has a possession of a file, can MFT move it to its transaction-specific folder?
Yeah, I'm trying to understand this question. Once
MFT has possession of the file, can it then move it to its transaction-specific folder?
I mean, you could, yeah, I mean, MFT, of course, when it's, I think I'm assuming somebody says MFT, they're referring to the ActiveTransfer server. Yeah, once, if it's a file that has come to the central server, through ActiveTransfer server. Of course, you can do a variety of actions, right, with ActiveTransfer server. Once it receives the file, it can actually, perform whatever file operations you want to do, move file, copy file, whatever you want to do. You can do all of that. You have all of that capability. You can even invoke integration server service on the server side to kick off other actions, perform other business processes. You absolutely have all of those capabilities available. Then you can pretty much customize whatever process you need to do once a file is received on the central server side.
Can we leverage integration agent for MFT agent?
No. Integration server, agent was created for a completely different reason. You need to have MFT agent. MFT agent is the one that communicates with ActiveTransfer server, centrally managed, monitored, and so on. It has the underlying protocols, underlying configurations, underlying wiring built in order to do the file transfers between these remote locations on the ActiveTransfer server. So you need to have ActiveTransfer agent and not integration server agent.
Here's a question I don't know that we know the exact answer to, but regarding our, Ramesh, free trials that we offer, and we offer, in the past we've offered one for web methods in general. Do you know if we expect or when a 10.2 free trial, and will that include agents?
A good question. Yeah, potentially, Charlie, we can explore putting this into the trial license. I know we just launched the innovation release, right? The 10.2 is an innovation release. So I think it's good to put it in the trial, apply, have a trial version available, and have customers try it out and provide feedback. Absolutely, I think this is something we can definitely look into.
Okay, great. Thanks for that question. And it looks like we have one more that we can get to. And by the way, if we can't get to all the questions today, we will follow up as part of our Digital Business Demos policy, Q&A policy. And to flip that, if an additional question occurs to you after we've presented today, please feel free to use the contact information on your screen. Again, if you want to use the chat box to request a registration link for the user group sessions, please do so, or reach out to me directly. There's my email address, and I will provide that as well, in addition to any other questions you might have about those two events. Finally, is MFT agent using reverse HTTPS connection?
No, it's not using a reverse HTTPS connection. It's a direct HTTPS connection where the agent connects to the ActiveTransfer server. It's not using a reverse connection, no.
With that, I want to thank Ramesh Venkat for joining us today. We're very excited about these agents. Whether you want to call them agents or Filebots, that's up to you, but as far as the product catalog is concerned, they're agents. So that's what the documentation would tell you. We think the use cases are exciting, and not only exciting, but actually very important in terms of doing business. So please join us again. We're coming up around to API, and I know for a fact we're going to preview the Gartner MQ on APIs. Obviously, we have an ulterior motive there, but please join us for that next week, and we'll be following that up with more bots. I don't know if the RPA people want to use that nickname, but that's what this will be about, driving productivity through the roof through robotic process automation. Until then, thanks again for attending. We appreciate it very much, and we hope to see you again next week. Till then, have a great rest of the day.